that we can save this for posterity. Well, welcome all. We are thrilled to have you here for Second Act Advantage on a morning like this one. I'm especially grateful to say I'm Seth Green, the Dean of the Graham School here at the University of Chicago. Welcome to our glorious campus, which is every bit this green and this sunny at this moment. So it is a great day here in Chicago. Jay was sharing he's in Palm Springs, and I was bragging about our weather for a change because it's going to be high 60s and sunny here. So who says Chicago can't have the best weather? Welcome to the Graham School. For those who are not familiar, we are 135 years young now as a trailblazer in lifelong learning. And we have many other gatherings coming up in the weeks ahead that we invite you to. Next week, we will have Suel Chan as part of our America at 250 series, looking at the past, present, and future of journalism. We'll then have our first Friday lecture at the end of next week on Polybius and Josephus on the Roman Empire. And then early the following week, we will have a literature discussion with Amitav Ghosh, one of the most significant novelists of our time. So we're very excited for all of those and hope you can join us, two of which, the first and the last, are in person. And then finally, we have our summer course registration open. And so we encourage you to get ready for a summer of discovery. But the reason that you are all here is for our conversation with Jay Samit. Welcome, Jay. We are thrilled to have you with us.
Good to
Jay
be here,
is
Seth.
an extraordinary person. I'll just share a little bit about his background. He's an international best-selling author. He is a serial entrepreneur, and he is the former independent vice chairman of Deloitte Digital, described by Wired as having the coolest job in the industry, which is a pretty cool job to have. He has pioneered breakthrough technology used by billions of consumers and helped grow companies like LinkedIn, Sony, and Universal Studios. He has a number of past books, Disrupt You and Future Proofing You, which is actually a great fit for the conversation that we're going to have today. And so, Jay, with that background in mind, you've spent decades at the forefront of disruption and innovation, working with many of the world's most transformative companies. What made you turn your lens to old age in this book or to the second half of life?
So, the second act doesn't necessarily have to start when you're older.
Right, I know. I was kidding.
We're,
I,
we're,
I
look,
get it.
we're looking right now, in just the past 2 years, the big five tech giants have laid off 1.2 million professionals.
Wow.
AI is going to disrupt a ton of careers. And disruption, in my opinion, isn't about what happens to you, it's how you respond. So, the second act advantage, I really looked at two things. One, at a time when AI and corporations are pushing out older workers, people are feeling despondent or negative or, whatever, when in fact you have all the advantages. You have a network that you've built in your lifetime. You have the experience that from living the life. And now with AI as a tool, it's a force multiplier. So people weren't talking about this. The other thing is I looked around and I was shocked to see, you know, billionaires that were miserable because when they gave up their career, they gave up their identity, their social structure, and retirement is fatal. You have a 53% increased likelihood of mortality if you retire than compared to those that don't. So that was the reason.
Well, so let's dive into some of the content. I mean, one of the surprising findings, Jay, in the book is that entrepreneurs over 50 are three times more likely to succeed than younger ones, which I think is a different idea than our kind of stereotypical young founder, excuse me, that builds that tech company, the Mark Zuckerberg, the Bill Gates, right? So talk to us about what drives that advantage and why don't you think we hear these stories more often?
So I was from that generation. I worked with those guys, and that was the focus of Silicon Valley when everything was new. We've now had a digital generation or two that have been around, and we've watched change. Our generation in particular understands the speed of change, and it's only accelerating. And as I said, when I started my first company at 21, I got lucky. I was cocky at 21. You don't know how lucky you are. But I didn't have anything. I didn't know how the world worked. I didn't have any contacts. I had no capital of my own. And now, in your second act, not only do you have that network that you can instantly tie into, But the world is networked, and you don't have to hire a bunch of staff. You don't have to raise a bunch of capital. AI can do almost all the annoying parts of business. You can now just say, make me a website that looks like this, and the website's there. You don't have to buy a bunch of software. The software is virtually all free. And you even don't have to take on a partner that you share equity with, because you can have a digital mentor that can guide you through anything you don't know how to do. It's a great time.
And is part of the reason we don't hear as much, this is my hypothesis, so I'm asking you to dispute me, that and I'm thinking about Arthur Brooks, fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence, that early on you have fluid intelligence, you're cocky, you don't know any better, so you just imagine these things that are very disruptive and you don't realize all the ones that have failed before you, so you go after it, right? Crystallized intelligence later on, you start to see patterns, start to recognize them, you have better judgment. And so I
Correct.
would think, okay, if you have fluid intelligence, you do the things that are kind of nutty when you start them, but they end up becoming these huge seismic shifts, right? So, no one would have thought of the personal computer when Bill Gates was, and Steve Jobs were working on it, because it was just like, has to be this huge thing. How could you possibly, right? So you end up getting these really transformational entrepreneurs, maybe coming a little bit younger, but you have many more times success among older entrepreneurs who have this crystallized intelligence, are making good judgments, but they're not necessarily driving some of these like absolutely disruptive companies. Is that a fair way to think about the divide here? Why we hear so much about young
That,
entrepreneurs
that,
because they make these,
that you're absolutely on point, but there's some other obvious things. I've
yeah,
raised hundreds of millions of dollars from Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley.
yeah,
And virtually every VC would prefer to back somebody that's already had a failure or two,
right,
because you've learned your lessons on somebody else's dime.
yeah.
So that's what time gets you. So yes, according to the Kauffman Foundation, you're 3 times more likely to succeed if you're venture backed over 50. But you're now also seeing that people aren't having to raise capital as quickly, because so much can be done, proven that old minimal viable product, well, AI can give you that in push a button.
Right.
So now you can get market fit and really just go for growth capital. And that's why you see, AI companies being the example that they can do that. Their first raise is in the billions as opposed to the millions. Inconceivable 10 years ago.
Well, so in the book, you draw on stories of late blooming entrepreneurs and you look at some of the common threads that you see across these individuals who really reinvent themselves later in life. And so, can you talk a bit about, maybe let's start with, what are the common threads among those who can reinvent and can begin these next chapters of entrepreneurship? And then maybe we'll come over to what you see holding others back.
So I'm sure everybody has heard about the blue zones, where they studied all these people that lived to 100 and all the different places. And the first time out, they completely missed it. Diet's important, exercise is important, but that wasn't the difference. These people had a purpose, what the Japanese called Ikigai, a reason to get out of bed. And so when you look at the throughput, some of these senior entrepreneurs are accidental entrepreneurs. I'll give you a great example. A woman named Joan McDonald, love her. She was 71, acid reflux, arthritis, overweight. You got the picture, typical 71. But she decided she was going to start doing something about it and started exercising. But she was going to exercise on Instagram. Fast forward, she's now 79. If I showed you a picture of her, she's Schwarzenegger. She is ripped. But at the same time, she built up 2 million plus Instagram followers and is making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. There are people sharing cooking online and making $1 million a year. There's people just eating online. And I'm talking about all seniors. It's the biggest growth. You have knowledge, you create a course. AI can build the whole course for you. You put it up on Udemy or one of these places. You're making money when you're asleep. But that purpose gets you energized. And for many of the people, they're entrepreneurs, but not for profit. So they're solving world's problems. They're doing charity work, but they're involved. They're learning, because again, neuroplasticity, keep your mind going. And you want to do this at any moment in history, but this in particular, because we're now learning how, David Sinclair at Harvard, to stop the aging and reverse the aging of cells.
Yeah.
So hang in there for these 10 years and you could come out of them being 30 again. And that's not science fiction. We will see people now living, but not just long lives, but a healthy life, an active life. So your second act, and this is what I discovered in all the research in the book, the second act advantage, most likely will be longer than your first act. So don't think of it, what am I going to do for me? What will the world gain that I now have the time and resources to focus on it? And that's the exciting part. You become the
So
phoenix.
purpose propels. And so, they're driven by purpose. And so they're accidental in the sense that they're just trying to solve a problem, but in the process, they build a company or a business or a new flywheel. And so that purpose can be motivational, but you also write in the book about things that hold people back. And I'm curious if you can talk about like who are some of the people that are failing these second acts and why? And what is it that holds them back from being able to make that transition?
So the number one thing is your teachers, your parents, everybody pushed you down a path of security. Take the secure job because they didn't want to see you fail. And as we now have realized that 90% of the original Fortune 500 companies don't exist, there is no security. It was the illusion of security that robbed ambition and put people on this path. So you have to get people into a growth mindset. And there's whole books on it. But my last book that you mentioned, Future Proofing You, I took a homeless immigrant, had raised family, had been on welfare. There's no chance. And I wanted to see, could I mentor him, give him no cash, no business contacts. And spoiler alert, if you're in the middle of the book, he goes from homeless to self-made millionaire in under a year. But I had to switch that mentality. And there's a psychological trick that you can do. It's called lying. It's called the Pygmalion effect. Basically, a teacher goes into school, tests all the kids, and tells the teachers, these 7 kids will be the super learners, super achievers this year. At the end of the year, it turns out true. But the person lied. They just pulled names out of a hat. If you tell people they're special and you treat them special, they become special. So with this one individual, I told him I had interviewed 200 candidates, and it was the only one that had all the attributes to be a self-made millionaire. And basically, that was all that it took. So with the second act advantage, I don't think reading a book is enough. So I've bundled the book with a free personal AI to mentor you, to guide you, completely designed just with you involved, not taking any personal data, no corporation behind, just a free tool because I don't know where you are in your journey. And Digital J does. And so this is a fun experiment to see if more people can get out of their way, so to speak.
Well, so you're describing one big challenge is mindset, right? That people may have a fixed mindset. Growth mindset unlocks the potential to see those possibilities. Is part of the challenge at this stage that you can be maybe more fixed than early in your life because you've had 30 years of success and stability. And so in some ways you feel, even if it's not real, there's more of a loss, right? I mean, you gave an example there where someone maybe doesn't feel that they have a lot to lose. I don't know the specifics of that context. Obviously, there's a lot of unique elements of that story. I imagine not
Right.
everyone just with a growth mindset can overcome the systems of poverty. But still, is that something where it's harder
So
at this stage of life to embrace because maybe you have a fear of losing, if that makes sense, because you've
what you're
gained so much?
describing is what's happening in every C-suite of every corporation. What
Yeah.
got the people onto the executive floor, they think that that's what will get them through the rest of their career. And that's why big companies don't change. That's why big companies fail. Bye-bye Blockbuster, all those great examples of the Kodak, moments. But for the individual, it's quite different. They had success. They had an identity. Their large part of their social structure was around their career. When they step away from that,
Right. They've already lost.
retirement syndrome, they've lost all that. And because they were pushed out, as often happens, they feel it's them, when in fact, they have all the things that AI doesn't have, and AI becomes their support system for doing it. And that's where I'm trying to open it. And we're also talking to the last generation, the boomers are the last generation in history that weren't natively digital. So many of them may have, used a computer, done this or that, but I'm specifically talking to people that can remember when they said, I'll never have a computer in my house. Why do I need it? Or I'll never have an iPhone. Like it doesn't have any buttons. Well, they're now saying, I'll never use AI. And yet AI is using them all day long. AI is determining what they watch next on Netflix, what they order with Amazon, which way their car turns. So why not use that to empower your future,
Well,
both
so
for your
on that
health and
note,
business?
you've already referenced this, Jay, but in the book you do quite a bit more. Can you just talk a little bit about how you see AI opening new doors to the second act? I mean, you've talked about the efficiency play. You can now obviously start a business or enterprise or movement without a huge labor force because you have a lot of the, administrative aspects done efficiently through artificial intelligence. Is there another way in which you see
Oh,
AI being transformational for this stage?
but let's go on the personal side of it.
Yeah.
As we're going older, we would like to stay independent as long as we can. So your self-driving vehicle allows you to drive at 100. I mean, there's Waymos all over the place. I've had a self-driving car for years. But you can also now have sensors that you wear in your home, so relatives far away can keep track of you, that you can interact with an AI and it'll notice if you're having onset of dementia, if your language is changing, can allow people. So all of these tools are now coming along that will support that independence and will keep you challenged and engaged mentally so that you don't deteriorate. Getting older doesn't mean losing functionality. And we need to start realizing that those are two separate things. We are biological organisms that it's use it or lose it. So AI can help you both physically and mentally. And so I have a whole chapter in the second act advantage of the technology that's available today. I'll give you one example. For a blind person, they've mastered using a cane, okay, the white cane. Now there's an AI cane tied like to GPS the same way your car is that can tell them exactly where the door to the building is or where is the McDonald's and how many steps and knows exactly where it is in the physical world. So digital doubles are being created for everything. You can now communicate with anyone in any language. I'm now doing press interviews where they think I'm speaking Japanese or Polish or Chinese. My books are in a dozen languages because simultaneous translation, I'm hearing them in my language, vice versa, but it's also doing the lip syncing. And this will now be available later this year on every cell phone in this country. You don't need new equipment or download an app. The carriers will be doing it. So those are the ways that AI is just exploding your opportunity. But there's so many announcements, so much thing. It can be overwhelming. But that's the great part. There's no pride in asking AI, I don't get it. It will teach you step by step of wherever you are in your knowledge.
Well, so we have two questions here that I think are related, Jay, and I want to bring them both to you at the same time. The first is from Annie Regal. How do we adjust to working on our own to create something new when many of us have worked in large companies with built-in infrastructure? Part two from Cheryl Collins. I decided to leave a career as a not-for-profit CEO to start my own business. Do you have specific ideas to help me switch mental gears from being the boss to becoming my own boss as I start a new business? And so both are about how do I move from being an institutional leader, right, to being on my own. There's, yes, the administrative or efficiency plays of AI, but then there's this mental side, right,
Oh,
of like,
100%.
I am an entrepreneur, but institutionally am attached to the University of Chicago. So that's my identity. That's what it means. To be an entrepreneur outside of here is a totally different idea if I'm doing it on my own. Then I have to rely on my own brand. That may not be comfortable to me. Can you talk a little bit about this switch from being part of an institution to being on your own and being your own boss? And how do you do that successfully when so many of us have really embraced and thrived with an institutional mindset?
Well, what you've actually become is institutionalized. If you watch prisoners that have been in prison for 10 years and they get out, they don't make eye contact. They've learned how how to shrink and fit in and survive in that environment. You've done the same. You've shrinked your will to get along. What you have to realize is the second you realize there's nobody else coming to help, including our government, okay? Real great motivator, okay? Fear is the number one motivator, okay? So now, what don't you know how to do? Where are you lacking? What can you offset? And now you have the smartest employee on the planet is available to you 24/7 for free. And that's what AI is. It can also give you the daily motivation. The best use of AI isn't to use it like Google and ask for, a piece of information. It's here's what my business plan, what's wrong? Here's my book, what's missing, right? Ask those challenging things that when you were in a company, there was somebody you always went to that you respected their opinion and their experience. There's nothing that you can't learn quicker, so you don't need to have the years of experience as an entrepreneur. So in the book, I go through all the different ways that you can get funding, from crowdfunding to government grants to money you don't have to pay back or give back. And so here's the touching on, and then you go, well, how do I actually do? Where's the form? What do I do? Well, that's where the digital AI that comes with it walk you through step by step. Some people are also not real self-aware. Okay,
Right.
I'm guilty of that. I never played sports, and my editor of my first book, she said, you're really competitive. I go, no, I'm not. I never played sports. I've been competing with myself nonstop my whole life. I need mental help. But there are psychological tests that we have on the site for the second Act Advantage, free, that you can find out. I like speaking. I'm afraid of speaking. I like being collaborative. How do I put a team together? I like being on my own. I like working with my hands. I'll make something on Etsy. I mean, there's one guy, tell the story. He just looked around and saw these 3D models for his 3D printer that he just got, a little home printer. And he goes, this thing's cool. Lots of people could use it. Didn't change anything, didn't add anything, didn't invent the thing, just put it on Etsy. $10,000 of income the first month. That's your motivator, and then you figure out the rest. By the way, these genius billionaires, some are geniuses, most aren't. They didn't know what they were doing either. You figure it out as you go. And that's part of the fun of living on the edge. You got another good question, I can see.
I do. Yes. So we've got a few of them actually populating the chat. This one is from Millie. What is your experience with asking AI about something that doesn't exist yet? AI is smart about stuff that already exists, but it predicts the next word, and the word must have already been written. Second question, to what extent is sharing our plans on these also informing our competition? Any
Okay, so
thoughts on those questions?
the second one I'll start easy, because every startup, every pitch was like, you got to sign an NDA. Okay, somebody's going to steal nobody wants to steal your idea, because an idea is worthless. It's all the work that it takes to make it happen. I can tell you 1,000 things that were all turned down forever and ever until somebody did give up and made it happen, including iPhones and PCs and everything else. Okay, so don't worry about, you want to tell 1,000 people, because you might find 20 that want to come work for you. Okay, as far as correct, the LLM, large language model AI, is looking for pattern recognition across all thought that already exists. First of all, you haven't been exposed to all thought and all knowledge, so good place to start. It has. It's like your doctor's only seen 10,000 mammograms. The AI has seen 50 million. Who's going to notice a pattern earlier? But there are other AIs. I was chairman of one of the AI companies that wasn't following the LLM. It was called active inference. Lecture for another day. But an actual learning that has no need for any model. It learns everything the same way a child and a plant and an ant and we learn, and each cell learns. And active inference is now going into the next generation of NVIDIA GPUs. So things will learn. And the reason for this is you buy a robot, cheap robot, $10,000. It does whatever you need it around the house, and you've got it perfectly trained, and then it breaks and wears out. All that training that it learned, the next robot instantly starts at that same spot. And
Right.
all robots in the world have that knowledge. So, yes. The other thing to remember is today's AI is as dumb as it will ever be. And it's still smarter than any of us. So the future looks impressive.
Well, so Greg, final question here is about how we deal with AI being so important and yet so many people lacking access to digital fluency and in some cases to digital access. Thoughts on, that piece of the equation, especially when we look at, the divide generationally and how that can influence ability to participate in the marketplace in a second act.
So more people on the planet Earth have access to a cell phone than they do to a toothbrush.
Hmm.
Okay. So access isn't the issue. Okay. The average senior is spending 6 hours a day online. Now, are they just playing a game? Are they just watching cats play on the piano? So it's what are you doing with that time? And so I'm trying to get people out of that malaise of, bread and circuses, as the Romans would call it, of just, I'll just be entertained. There's nothing I can do, and get them engaged again, learning a language, learning an instrument, learning to do, because when you quickly see what you can create, even if it's not for a business, you can talk to AI today, give it in one sentence a script of what you want as a cool video. I'll give you an example. My granddaughter was doing Mary Poppins at her school. Her uncle has a corgi. Make a corgi dressed as Mary Poppins dancing on the roof with the chimney sweeps to, that song. Push one button after saying that sentence, beautiful, full rendered Hollywood movie, and I could send that and wish her good night, good luck on the play tonight. I can write love songs about inside jokes to my spouse. I can have my paintings animated. I love Gumby. I just did a claymation trailer. It's on YouTube for the Second Act Advantage, which is amazing, phenomenal, unbelievable. It was 30 seconds of my life.
Well, you are someone who is building a second act right now because you have transitioned to being an author. We're grateful for your writing this book. We're grateful for your sharing your insights with us today. And we look forward to continuing to follow this advantage as more and more people potentially have it as demographics move in this direction. Thank you so much again, Jay, for your time and for having this conversation with us.
Thanks for having me. Anybody can reach out to me on anywhere on social media. And I hope you enjoyed the book, and I look forward to seeing what you create.
Thanks so much, Jay. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day, everyone.